Welcome back. I'm Dr. Deb, and I'm the department chair and instructor for the Learning Strategies Department here at VC. In today's video, I'm answering a big question. What am I doing wrong when learning? This information is based on the information processing theory, which deals with how we process information. When I return, we will jump right into the theory to see what it is and how we can use it to help us improve our learning in college. VC's Total Learning Center presents Dr. Deb Explains how to improve your information processing. First, let's take a look at what information processing theory is. At its heart, it's essentially comparing your brain to a computer in how it processes information. We all know that a computer is very efficient at processing huge amounts of information, and our brains work in a very similar manner as it works to process huge amounts of information every day. The problem is that many people, especially students, don't understand how the brain works, so they are not processing information in the most effective manner. So let's look at how the process works. Our brains have 3 stages of memory, and each stage is responsible for a specific task or works in a specific way. First, there is the sensory memory. This part of our memory takes in information from our senses all the time. Everything we see, hear, feel, smell, touch goes into our sensory memory all day, every day. Most of the items that enter our sensory memory go unnoticed or are forgotten 1/2 of a second to 3 seconds later. However, if we actively pay attention to something, that information may go into our short-term or working memory. Let's see this in action for a moment. We are sitting at school or work, and there are numerous things going on around us all of the time. The AC kicks on or off, phones ring, people shuffle around, papers rustle. Our brains take in all this information without us even paying attention to it. However, let's say that during our normal day, a whiff of cinnamon drifts past. That smell is absorbed in our sensory memory. For just a brief moment, we are reminded of being at our grandmother's house as she bakes apple pies. All of the other sights, sounds, smells have entered into our sensory memory and have been lost. But the mere act of thinking about the smell of cinnamon pushes that into our short-term memory. This is why active engagement is so important for college students. We must actively interact with the content and the material in order to even begin the process of information processing. When we don't actively engage with the information, it's gone within 3 seconds. If we actively engage with the information, then it goes into the second stage, working or short-term memory. This stage can handle 7 plus or minus 2, so about 5 to 9 items, or chunks of information at a time. And the information in working or short-term memory lasts between 5 and 15 seconds if nothing is done with it, and then it is forgotten. It is at this stage that we can keep information in our minds by repeating it over and over again. If you've ever had someone give you a phone number and you didn't have anything to write it down on, then you're very familiar with this process. If you repeat the number over and over again until either you can dial it or write it down, then you can keep that information in your short-term memory without losing it. However, if someone asks you a question while you're repeating that information over and over again, and you stop to answer it, what happens to your number? Most likely it's gone forever. In order to encode the information in long-term memory, we must actively engage with this information. For example, we must actively connect it to what we already know, or we must be surprised to discover that information as we believe something different. We must think about it, elaborate on it, connect with it, etc. Then, once it's in our long-term memory, we must practice retrieving that information, recalling it from our long-term memory into our short-term memory again in order to do something with it or to process that information again. Our long-term memory is finite. We can process and store as much information here as we need to, and the information is fairly permanent. Remember growth mindset? There is no limit to what we can learn, what we can process, and what we can store. as long as we use the correct procedure for doing so. So what are these correct procedures? Let's examine some common study techniques to see if they help us process information. First, let's look at highlighting either your notes or your textbook. As you are reading, you read the words and think, "Oh, this may be important as it has a bold term and a definition." You run the highlighter over the words and begin reading again. What parts of your memory did that get to, and will you remember it later? The act of reading is mostly putting the words into your sensory memory. They go into your brain and out again within 3 seconds. That's why you can get to the bottom of the page and have no idea what you just read. When you take a moment and think the information is important and highlight it, you pay attention to it, which sends the information to your short-term memory. However, that's where it stops. Within 15 seconds, your brain won't even remember that you highlighted this term and definition if that's all you do with it. Now let's look at rereading your notes or textbook. We can see in the previous example how reading works. So what about rereading? Again, if all you do is read the words, you're putting the information into your sensory memory, but that's as far as it goes. Finally, let's look at flashcards. Most students write the word on one side and the definition on the other side. When they study, they read the word and then flip the card and read the definition on the other side. The act of writing the term and definition on the card is enough to take it from sensory to short-term memory, and the act of reading the word and the definition over and over again is enough to keep it there for a while, just like repeating the phone number over and over again. However, it isn't doing anything to push that information into long-term memory. So what is the correct way to study to ensure correct information processing? As you read, you should be thinking about the material and actively engaging with it. This takes the information from sensory to short-term to long-term memory. Then, you need to practice recalling this information often. You can use flashcards, but you need to use them correctly. As you read the word or definition, think about what the definition or word is and try to answer it without looking. And don't just memorize the book definition. Put the information in your own words and make sure you understand how it works and how to apply it in different situations. This actively recalls the information from your long-term memory, and the more you do this, the better you will get at recalling that information when you need it. And this doesn't have to be done with flashcards. As you drive to work, think about the key ideas from a lesson or reading and recall them without looking at anything. Think about why they may have occurred, what it means, etc. Merely retrieving the information is what it takes to build the strong connections needed to keep the information in long-term memory available for later use. That wraps up the basics of information processing theory. Leave a comment below explaining which parts you've currently been doing correctly and which parts you need to work on to improve. If you want to know more about how to be a successful college student based on theory, strategies, and principles for student success, click the subscribe button and hit the notification bell, and check out my other videos as Dr. Deb explains.